Good morning. Welcome to the Special Education Advisory Panel meeting Wednesday, September 2nd, 2020. I'm Dr. Melissa Card from the Alabama State Department of Education. I have with me Ms. Crystal Richardson.
Good morning, everyone. Thank you for participating today.
And I have Mr. Eric Dixon.
Good morning, everyone.
The agenda will be as follows. We'll have a welcome by the chairperson, Ms. Gina Winter. We'll have public comments read by Ms. Gina Winter. We're going to take a quick break. Then we'll have significant disproportionality presented by Mr. Eric Dixon. Special education section updates by Ms. Crystal Richardson. A ALSDE presentation or updates by Dr. Elizabeth Davis. And final comments by Ms. Gina Winter.
Thank you, everyone. Can everyone on the panel hear? Thumbs up. I'd like to welcome you all back. I believe that we had some technical snafus during the last panel meeting, and so this is a reschedule and a continuation of that with technical difficulties resolved. So I appreciate the State Department working so to make sure that this went off without a hitch, and we hope it does today too. I would like to begin the meeting with a roll call. With Ms. Gwendolyn Baker. Are you with us today? Amy Blakeney. Dustin Chandler.
Present.
Lisa Clayton.
Here.
Adrian Creel. Lisa Dorman.
Here.
And our new member representing students that are homeless, Kristen Dial. Pamela Fawcett. English Gonzalez. Tasha Betts.
I'm here.
Shaquila Ford. Leonard Broderick. Josetta Manning Jones.
Here.
Jason Martin.
Good morning, I'm here.
Tamira McElrath.
Present.
Corey Merchant.
Here.
Joel Pitts.
Good morning, and I'm here.
Graham Season.
Good morning, here.
Lori Skidmore.
Good morning, I'm here.
Kay Sprayberry. Todd Tomlin.
Here.
Anita Toney. Tamala Warren. James Williams.
Here.
Amy Williamson.
I'm here.
Myself, Gina, I'm here, and Michelle Wood,
I'm here.
and Miss Renata Rice.
I'm here.
She is our newest member representing charter schools. So welcome.
Thank you.
Have I missed anyone?
Yes, Valencia Curry, State DHR.
Thank you. I apologize for that. With all, we do have a quorum, so we will move forward. There has been so much change, so much adaptation, and so many things have been occurring. This, I am sure, is one of the most challenging years in our lifetime of education related to navigating new ground and supporting students with disabilities. With all of that, we have received many comments around related difficulty, particular insight, experiences of teachers, families, as I'm sure you all are navigating also. We are, we're navigating new land. We're navigating new situations. We are finding the use of technology to both present challenges and create accessibility options for our students. I would like to take a minute just to open the floor for any particular thoughts or experiences or anything that any of the panel members might like to share. Innovative things that are happening out there. It's a quiet group this morning. We are scheduled to do public comment at 10 a.m. Would it be all right if I went ahead and read the redacted comments at this point, and then we can still reserve that time?
Yes, that's not a problem on
Sure.
our end.
With respect to the comments that have been received and making sure that we ensure the privacy of students, I have gone to some link to redact some of the information. So the comments will not be read exactly as they've been received, but we will share them with the panel. Now, some of these comments were received prior to systems beginning instruction. And so some of them will be landed in time. I'll say that. So as we go through this, I'm going to do my best to ensure that we mention no particulars about any particular student, any system, or any individuals. This comment came and it says, the 1% of students with severe disabilities are constantly left out of decision-making. While there may be a small percentage of the student population, these students still have the right to a quality education. When millions of dollars were just spent to purchase online learning platforms and curriculum, these students were left out again. There is nothing in Schoolology or School PLP, another $13 million issue we don't have time for to assist teachers who teach these students. When we moved to alternate, we received basically nothing to prepare students for the assessment, especially when compared to the resources given to their peers taking the ACAP summative. Now we have schools allowing students to come on campus for sports, but not allowing students who need instruction and related services to come on campus to receive them. Sports over academics. Are you prepared for the number of potential due process complaints that are about to be filed because of this, if the school is safe enough? Suggestions for improvement include teachers of these students need to have a voice in decision-making. These students have a unique set of needs that cannot be met by blanket services and packages. Do not invest in programs that do not include the Alabama alternate standards. If these students have their own state standards, then anything purchased by the state should include them as well. Be their voice. Many do not have their own. The second comment that we've received is from a parent of a child with autism. Her specific concerns were about return to school, back to traditional school. She asked, will schools be more lenient on behavioral challenges and often more help to these children that do suffer with challenges in routine? If we go remotely, how will services be provided? Also, this individual is a nurse on the front lines. She will need to continue work as an essential worker. Will grades be taken into consideration due to learning from home all day? And her suggestion is for all students, especially special needs children, their attendance and grades should not be expected to be the same as if they were in traditional school settings. The third comment that we received is from an individual that serves as a substitute teacher for 2 different school systems. She serves in 5 different schools and frequently subs in self-contained special education classrooms. She particularly asked, will there be designated substitutes for self-contained units to prevent the spread of COVID-19 to possibly medically fragile populations? Will it be economically viable option for substitutes to work only in these classrooms and not the general population? I have to work 2 districts and 5 schools, so I can work on a full weekly schedule and don't go over my maximum allowed days per district. I work in middle and high schools and see up to 500 students in 5 days. I love working in special education, but I'm concerned about their health, but also do not see how it would be possible to have substitutes working in those classrooms without a contracted agreement. Yes, okay. The fourth public comment that we received was, how will one-on-one instruction be held when or if school is dismissed again? We need a plan for kids to have face-to-face access to their instructors. The alternative would be to hire an outside contractor for therapies if the school is unwilling to do so. The special needs children were really left behind to regress back in March when all of this began. As parents, they want to keep that from happening again by being proactive instead of reactive. I understand that no one knew what to do then, but now that it's been 5 months, I'm hoping there is a better plan in place. Specifically, how will IEPs be maintained if schools stop again? This question may seem redundant, but there are rumors that IEPs will be discarded if schools close. We must anticipate school closures as a possibility for short periods of time. Even that happens during flu season. Keeping that in mind, we must be prepared to serve our precious students who cannot learn online and depend on the district for multiple disciplines of therapy, which require face-to-face interactions. Please help us by being prepared and working with parents. We can work together to make this work. We must. Our children depend on it. Our small group setting classrooms should be sustainable regarding of what the general ed classrooms are doing. Our kids should not be banned from school property, as was the case in March. That was determined to many children that depend on school services. Detrimental. We need an alternative plan that allows exceptions for those receiving IEP services through the school. One size does not fit all. Help us parents to be part of the plan and the solution. Again, we must work together. And in response, small group settings contain classrooms, students, teachers, therapists, and aides could work independent of the rest of the school to keep our kids served and teachers safe. Perhaps children shouldn't go in and out of these classrooms, but rather opt in or opt out of the contained environment, or have the adults do the traveling from room to room. The reason for this is that many in this setting cannot wear masks. Some are at high risk. Keeping them contained helps them get all the services they need while keeping them safe as possible. Alternatively, a hybrid classroom could be developed for those children who travel from gen ed to contained classrooms, if that is an option. In the case of school closing, we must consider each class separately and not the school as a whole. My child's contained classroom should not be closed to him if a teacher or student in a gen ed class that has no contact tracing to my child's class becomes ill. Contact tracing is an important factor in keeping schools open and making decisions on when to close and when to stay open, when to notify a parent their child has had a low or high risk exposure. As a healthcare professional, I'm willing to help train the staff on PPE or anything they may need. Thank you for your consideration. The next comment we received: many districts primarily offer related services in group settings. With the new option of in-person services offered individually only, how will all children be accommodated by the already short-staffed therapy teams? My suggestion for improvement is to hire more therapists. Individual is the best option for many kids regardless of COVID. The next comment was received from a parent with a son that has high functioning autism spectrum disorder. Over the past 6 months, I've watched him regress at a more rapid rate as each week goes on without services. My son thrives in a school setting. He learns skills that are imperative for him to become a successful member of society. During the past 6 weeks, I have heard nothing regarding a plan B for my child. Virtual learning isn't a beneficial method for him. Sure, I could get the academic work complete with him, but only if I quit my job and my family suffer financially. But without social engagement and guidance, my son and hundreds of other children will lose the skills they've worked so hard to achieve. I say I can handle the academic demands, but there are hundreds of parents that cannot, at no fault of their own. By law, the school system is bound to honor my child's IEP. How are you planning to accommodate my child and all of the other children with IEPs should school shut down? 1 hour of OT and speech a month is not enough, nor is what is clearly written within our IEP. Specific suggestions include autism and other special needs will have the priority of in-house education and services if limited numbers of students should be limited. Services should be offered in groups of 5 or less to reach maximum benefit. Parent training should be included in this plan regarding daily schedules and life skills. The bottom line, each student's IEP should be honored as it is a legally binding agreement. The next comment, I am asking for the option for students to be able to attend school in person. But if that is revoked, then at least the ability to meet with the special needs teachers weekly to meet student needs. This is a parent of a kindergartner who has been receiving speech services at their local elementary school and private pay speech therapy since the child was 3. He receives OT to help him with writing, grasping pencils and scissors, and other school-related activities. Based off of the parent's understanding in the last part of the school year, he will not be able to receive the adequate or hands-on help that he needs if they do virtual school only. He is the type of child that benefits from being around other children and observing typical student behaviors. I know this pandemic has changed a lot in our society, but I believe there are students that need the constant and normalcy back in their lives. The progress and help that the students receive at school outweighs the risk of the pandemic when proper guidelines are followed. I also have another child that's entering into a pre-K setting who is hoping and praying he gets to take his Spider-Man backpack to school with his big brother. Specific suggestions: allowing all students the option to attend school. The next comment we received: most children in the state didn't receive OT and speech therapy services as required by their IEP after schools closed due to COVID-19. How will OT therapy and speech therapy services be provided in the upcoming school year for those who are learning virtually? Will teletherapy be made available for those children who do not attend school in person? Is a hybrid option being considered for children with IEPs who are at higher risk but would derive more benefit from in-person therapy? The SEAP should consider using the same programs that schools use, like listserv, email programs used by schools to communicate with parents and caregivers, to communicate upcoming meetings and discussions that can affect their children's education and services. The next comment is from a parent. I would like to know what plan will be put in place for my son who has various special needs such as PDD, NOS, ADHD, anxiety, speech and language delays, and receives OT therapy also. There is no way that we will be able to sit him in front of a computer and do any online lessons or instructions. He has already regressed tremendously. Specific suggestions: if there is no traditional school setting like I have enrolled him for, then there needs to be an opportunity for him to receive one-on-one instruction in person, or a waiver grant to pay for us to enroll him in private therapies. The next comment is from a parent. A parent of a child with autism. It is a the child attends a self-contained unit that has one teacher and 3 parapros. I won't, for time's sake, include a list of her disabilities, behaviors, and possible regression school being suspended has caused. It's my opinion that inclusive classrooms have a better chance of having success with distance learning. It's also my opinion that non-inclusive classrooms, by their very nature, cannot benefit from any distant learning. Even a staggered schedule of a few days a week for these children would be beneficial, further reducing numbers in an already small class and greatly reducing potential exposure. As a single parent with no other family to care for my child in the event I am exposed, please know that I am for the safest environment possible. The physical and mental stress during the school suspension increases each week for both this parent and my child. That being said, I support whatever decision is made by professionals in education when school staff and my child's safety is put above any other consideration, including my own safety or well-being. I just wanted to offer an idea or starting point for consideration about special needs children and their school attendance during these times. The next comment proposed specific questions. How will students with IEPs be served during virtual remote learning? Asking as a parent and a teacher. If the schools require them to come in for so many hours, who is required to provide transportation, the school or the parent, if the student has to go in for their IEPs? Let's see. Okay. The next comment received: how will one-on-one instruction be held when or if school is dismissed again? We need a plan for our kids to have face-to-face access to their instructors. The alternative would be to hire an outside contractor for therapies if the school is unwilling to do so. The special needs children were really left behind to regress back in March when all of this began. We as parents want to keep that from happening again by being proactive instead of reactive. I understand that no one knew what to do then, but now that it's been 5 months, I'm hoping there's a better plan in place. How will IEPs be maintained if schools stop again? This question may seem redundant, but there are rumors that IEPs will be discarded if schools close. We must anticipate school closures as a possibility for short periods of time. Even that happens during flu season. Keeping that in mind, we must be prepared to serve our precious students who cannot learn online and depend on the district for multiple disciplines of therapy, which require face-to-face interactions. Please help us by being prepared and working with parents. We can work together to make this work. We must. Our children depend on it. Our small group setting classrooms should be sustainable regardless of what general education classrooms are doing. Our kids should not be banned from school property, as was the case in March. That was detrimental to many children that depend on school services. We need an alternative plan that allows exceptions for those receiving IEP services through the school. One size does not fit all. Help us parents be part of the plan and the solution. Again, we must work together. Specific suggestions: small group settings contained classrooms. Students, teachers, therapists, and aides could work independent of the rest of the school to keep our kids served and teachers safe. Perhaps children shouldn't go in and out of these classrooms, but rather opt in or out of the contained environment, or have the adults do the traveling from room to room. The reason for this is that many in this setting cannot wear masks. Some are at high risk. Keeping them contained helps them get all the services they need while keeping them as safe as possible. Alternatively, a hybrid classroom could be developed for those children who travel from gen ed to contained classrooms if there is an option. In the case of schools closing, we must consider each class separately and not the school as a whole. My child's contained classroom should not be closed to him if a teacher or student in a gen ed class that has no contact tracing to my child's class becomes ill. Contact tracing is an important factor in keeping schools open and making decisions on when to close and when to stay open, when to notify a parent their child has had a high-risk exposure, and this parent also is a healthcare professional, and she's willing to help with the training for any PPE needs. And I apologize if some of these may be repeats as they were resubmitted. Let's see. The next comment: we are concerned that we have received very little information on how services will be provided to our daughter who is on the autism spectrum if in-person school is canceled. In-person services are a requirement for people on the spectrum, and their value cannot be overstated. If we as a society allow for school sports and other extracurricular activities, then there is no reason that in-person services should be canceled for the special needs population. COVID is either a health issue or it's not. Virtual schooling does not work for these families, and the break from our reality while our daughter is at school is invaluable to our family's well-being. There must be structure in place for special needs unless all social activities are shut down by the governor. Specific suggestions. Where is our governor on this topic? Who will stand up for the least in our society? Leaving it up to the individual school districts is not the answer. Provide the in-person services for special needs students, as that population is more easily controlled in terms of distancing. Even if the services are for part of the day, it will be a great help to our family and other families dealing with this. Doing nothing is not an option. If school goes fully virtual, will the state reimburse families for their expenses of services for our kids? If there is no in-person services, there should be no extracurricular activities, including sports, cheer, and other school-sponsored gatherings. The next comment. Children that require special educational assistance, such as occupational, physical, speech therapy, etc., need continued education. Summers are already a struggle. Unless one can afford such therapy in the private sector, public education is vital. If remote learning is required, these children will become further behind. Parents of such children realize how valuable each day, month, and year of educational therapy is, and we wish to capitalize on every second that we can. Remote learning will result in further delays that our son and others will face on the other side of this. Specific suggestions. Can individual sessions be scheduled, appointment style, that would allow these types of needs continue to be met? This would allow sessions to be in a controlled environment, even if they are drastically reduced both in overall time and occurrence. The next comment. My concern or question of concern that I would like to see addressed during this meeting is about adapting or adhering to my son's legal IEP. This child has an assigned one-on-one parapro per his legal IEP, whose sole purpose is to assist him in being able to participate in school and complete his assignments, as well as assisting him with feeding and using the bathroom due to his disabilities. Also, per his IEP, my son is to receive speech and occupational therapy for a certain set of times throughout the week. I want to know what the school system is going to do to follow through with this legal document and provide these services he's supposed to receive, because right now, none of these things are being done, and it's going to make his ability to have any progress through virtual schooling impossible. He already shows signs of regression since school was changed to virtual last March. And all of these children with special needs and severe disabilities are going to continue to regress and be left behind. Either the school system should allow these children with disabilities to come to school in person so that they can be given the assistance they will need to be able to progress in their education and life skills, or the school system needs to allow us as parents and other paraprofessionals to both sign a waiver to allow his assigned one-on-one aid to come into our home to do what their job description is and what his legal IEP states until kids are allowed to come back into the classroom. The legal IEP for my child is not being fulfilled by our school system, and I want to know what is going to change. The last comment submitted was a letter that was previously submitted by and this came from the Alabama Disabilities Advocacy Program. I want to share with you some of the basic principles we are sharing with families of IDEA and 504 eligible students to help them to be effective advocates for their children as the 2020 school year gets underway. The principles are grounded in the law and simple in concept. The IDEA and Section 504 are in full effect. The IDEA and Section 504 are in full effect, pandemic or not. An IDEA or 504 eligible child is entitled to a free, appropriate public education, FAPE, with all that FAPE entails, including the provision of all those special education and related services a child needs to meet all her academic, behavioral, functional, or transitional needs. FAPE follows the child wherever he is being educated and requires individualism. Whether a child is learning in school, virtually, or through some blended or hybrid structure, he is entitled to those special education and related services needed to pursue grade level content standards and to address the child's other disability-related issues, including those for a child with the most significant disabilities. While on-site, virtual, blended, and hybrid frameworks are being developed, when it comes to special education students, schools must understand that individualization is a fundamental legal requirement. For those students learning remotely or through blended hybrid structures, we expect that general and special education teachers and providers have been creatively working together on how they will collaborate to ensure that general and special education and related services are provided. This planning might include the opportunity for in-person services for a child who, although learning remotely, requires such services to meet his unique learning needs. Given that other school activities such as football, band, and cheer have started up, in-person IEP and 504 services can as well, in order to supplement virtual learning and ensure the provision of FAPE. Doing individualized planning is at the heart of the IEP, an individualized educational program, and federal law. As with any IEP team discussion, parents must be actively engaged in this planning. They had a front row seat this past spring as to what worked and didn't work for their child during remote learning, and will have definite contributions as to how things can be improved upon this fall. This year's IEP must, as always, address current needs. To develop an IEP that is appropriately ambitious, contains challenging objectives, and is responsive to all a child's needs, the IEP team must understand her current abilities. In common special education lingo, what is the child's present level of performance, the plot? We understand that districts are putting together school-wide assessment programs for all students to gauge the magnitude of this spring and summer's learning slide. In addition to such global assessments, it might be necessary to conduct special education evaluations for a student with disabilities, depending on her unique needs, including behavioral, functional, and transitional evaluations. Each school district must have a plan in place requiring IEP teams in a timely manner upon a school reopening to review such regular and special education data and to consider input from parents regarding their impressions about their child's current needs so that a responsive IEP can be crafted for the new school year. Fourth point, children may be entitled to compensatory educational services. As described by the U.S. Department of Education, if a child failed to progress or worse, regressed because his learning needs were not met during the spring 2020 closure and remote learning period, the child might be eligible for compensatory education services. Each school district must have a plan in place through which its IEP teams will assess for the need for compensatory services. As with any IEP team discussion, parents must play an active role in discussions about the lack of progress or regression. Similarly, parents must meaningfully participate in an IEP team's development of a program of compensatory educational services, which might include before or after school services and/or services going into spring, summer, and fall of 2021. We are particularly concerned about the effect of the school closure and the switch to remote learning for students with the most significant and behavioral disabilities, transition age students, and early learners 3 to 5 years old. The Special Education Essentials from the Alabama State Department of Ed's Roadmap for Reopening Schools reflect those fundamental legal principles. Unfortunately, given what we've been hearing from families and through our own interactions with schools, it appears that some districts are not poised to implement the essentials and these legal principles with fidelity. The emergency pivot in spring 2020 to remote learning was, for many families of students with disabilities, challenging at best and disastrous at worst. Adequate learning supports were not provided. Technology was glitchy where it was available. Learning platforms were not accessible to students with disabilities. Work was poorly planned and not individualized. Homeschool communication was lacking. Children experienced emotional and behavioral challenges because of the cessation of school services and the lack of interaction with peers. Extended school year services, which could have been provided remotely during the summer, never seemed to materialize. It was as if mandate was just ignored this year. To prevent a repeat of spring and summer 2020 and further injury to the education of students with disabilities, we urge the ALSDE to be aggressive, not timid, in reaching out to LEAs regarding their legal obligations and in providing guidance regarding instructional strategies and supports. We also recommend that the ALSDE vigorously engage with and review districts' return to school special education plans pursuant to its IDEA general supervision responsibilities. If the ALSDE weekly supports districts and families too, key customers of the ALSDE risks long-term, if not irrevocable, harm to children and places districts at risk of legal conflicts. We welcome the opportunity to collaborate with the ALSDE in sponsoring outreach events and developing materials geared toward families. To that end, I have attached a list of questions that we collected from families as of the 1920 school year as it was winding down. The Alabama Parent Education Center has expressed interest in collaborating and outreach as well. So the specific areas of concerns for school reopening. How will my child's school make up for the learning she missed this spring and for any regression she's experiencing? Will I have input from the decisions of what my child's needs because of the school closure? How and who will make that decision? How can I prepare to help with that decision making? Will my child's school evaluate my child when he returns to school to see how he's doing? How will that evaluation be done? What kind of services can be provided to make up for what my child lost this spring? Can we get extra help during the coming school year and next summer 2021? If my child regresses or fails to progress, how will the school measure his regression? How will it be addressed when he returns to school in the fall? How can I help keep track of my child's progress or regression? And do I have any rights to ask for additional instruction or related services when she returns to school? My child was hit hard emotionally by the school closure this spring and with the social distancing we all had to do. His routines have been broken. He feels unsafe and he's acting out more. How can the school help with that? What will be done to help children transition back to school? My child is on a Section 504 plan. How will her needs be considered and addressed when school reopens? Must an IEP meeting be held once schools resumes if my child's needs have changed as a result of the school closure? How and when will IEPs for next year be written? I've heard that some schools are providing therapies such as behavioral and speech and language therapy via Zoom and other interactive video conferencing. Is my school required to do this for my child? How can I get services for my child? And the next strand was remote learning planning. Distance learning was next to impossible this spring. My child received homework packets from his teachers and had no direct instruction at all from any of them. None of the work that was sent home was individualized to his level. He's supposed to get small group instruction and one-on-one services in reading, math, and speech. He got none of that. I tried to help him as best I could, but it was hard. If there's another school closure, how can I make sure it goes better next time? To what extent is my school required to individualize remote learning for my child? How do I participate in that process? If my child has a 504 plan instead of an IEP, how will her needs be met through remote learning? How is my child's progress going to be measured during distance learning? How are transition services going to be provided for my older child with an IEP by distance learning? I don't always have the ability to help my child when she has tantrums or is frustrated about doing schoolwork at home. How can my school help? There's a lot of talk about expanding broadband coverage so that families that don't have access to the internet can gain access and with it be connected to online learning. That sounds great, but I don't have internet in my house or a computer because I can't afford them. Will there be any kind of support for families like mine? How will my child's social skill needs be met during any future distance learning? How will behavioral interventions that are included in my child's IEP be provided during any future distance learning period? How can speech services be provided to a child with language delays through distance learning? What do I do if a distance learning provided to my child isn't working? The next strand of comments and questions were surrounding recovering lost ground.
I'm sorry, this is the interpreter. We need to switch interpreters real quick.
Okay.
Thank you.
Gina, are you still there?
Yes, ma'am. I'm just waiting for the interpreter to switch.
Okay, thank you. Sorry.
Is the second interpreter
Yeah,
ready?
they switched, Gina. It was pretty seamless. They're ready to go.
Okay. The next strand of comments and questions came around recovering lost ground. What is compensatory education and
Hold on one
will
second, Gina. Hold on one second. We switched interpreters, but now the video's off. I thought interpreter 1 was ready to go. I apologize.
we'll just pause a moment until I get the go ahead.
I
Sorry.
believe both interpreters may have been interpreting before and not known which one was on and which one was off.
Oh, wow. Okay. I see. Okay, so when I got the cue earlier, when interpreter 1 said they needed to switch, I switched it. And so interpreter 2 has been interpreting. And I guess interpreter 1 didn't know that when I got the message to switch it, I did switch it. So I don't know how y'all want us to proceed. Let us know which one of y'all wants to go and we'll pick up from there. My apologies for the confusion, but when I got the message to switch, we did switch it.
Okay, I'm sorry, I was not aware. I can continue for another 10 minutes maybe, and then we will have to switch again. I
We should be
apologize.
done and it should be time for a break by then. She's halfway done with the questions, and so we should be good for that. If you'll finish out the questions. Thank you for that, and my apologies that you didn't get the word that we switched.
Okay, sure, I'm sorry.
We ready? If my school provided some services during the school closure, would my child still be entitled to compensatory educational services? Does a school district have to provide via compensatory education the same amount minute for minute of service time that was supposed to be provided to my child according to her IEP, but that wasn't covered or provided during the school closure? Does a school district have to provide via compensatory education the same amount minute for minute of service time that was supposed to be provided to my child according to her IEP, but that wasn't provided during the distance learning period? How must my child's school determine whether my child is entitled to receive compensatory education? How must my child's school determine the amount of compensatory education service time that she needs? How am I, as a parent, involved in the determination of compensatory education? My child didn't participate in all or some of the distance learning activities provided by his school while school was closed. Will my child still be eligible for compensatory education? When can compensatory education services be provided? What will they look like? What happens if a child's school fails for any reason to make an individualized determination for my child's needs for compensatory educational services? What happens if I disagree with about compensatory education services that are going to be provided to my child? The next strand of questions came around transition age students. How are schools going to work with vocational rehabilitation next school year if there are still limits as to where students can go in the community? What role will VR play? My son is supposed to be doing employment development in the fall at a job at a grocery store. If that placement falls through for any reason related, for example, to the coronavirus, how will he get those necessary job skills? My child was going to graduate school this year, but now I want her to stay longer because of what she missed in the spring semester. Can she do that? If so, how would I rearrange for that to happen? How can we do the summary of academic achievement and functional performance? The next strand is related specifically to extended school year during summer 2020. What are extended school year services? What's the difference between ESY and compensatory education? Will there be ESY summer services this year? If so, what will those services look like? We didn't talk about ESY at an IEP meeting this spring. How can we now determine whether my child needs ESY this summer? And the last strand of questions is about evaluation procedures. My child was being tested for services prior to the stay-at-home order. When can the testing be finished? When will the consent to implementation timeline begin again? And how will my child be evaluated if we're not in school? So these are specific questions that parents submitted through a survey around clarification points. This was the extent of the written comments that were received through the last meeting, and some were that resubmitted to be considered for this meeting again. With regard to interpreter challenges, I want to try to make sure that we stay on task, and I'm going to go ahead and ask us to take that 10-minute break and return at 10:45. So I'm going to ask all panel members to ensure that they are muted and return at 10:45 to begin our discussion around disproportionality updates.
Okay, good morning and welcome back from our break. We're going to proceed with the agenda here. Next on the agenda, we're going to have Mr. Eric Dixon. The Education Administrator for the Performance and Data Accountability Unit. And he's going to speak to you all about significant disproportionality.
Okay, thank you, Melissa. And I want to take this time and thank you, Gina, the chair for SEAP, as well as the panel members for giving us the opportunity to provide training and information to help with setting some targets and thresholds for significant disproportionality. With that being said, I'm going to just kind of give a synopsis of what took place and then kind of let you know the decision that we made and the actions we took. There was a requirement issued by the U.S. Department of Education that states must obtain stakeholder input in setting thresholds for significant disproportionality. And because of this requirement, the Special Education Advisory Panel members were provided an opportunity for training and information to yield broad stakeholder input around significant disproportionality. The Individuals with Disabilities Education Act, IDEA, under Section 618D, requires that states annually collect and examine data to determine if significant disproportionality based on race and ethnicity is occurring in the state and local education agencies regarding the following: the identification of children as children with disabilities, including identification by disability categories, the placement in particular educational settings, and also the incidence, duration, and type of disciplinary actions, including suspensions and expulsions. Significant disproportionality is the remedy when an LEA has been identified by the state as having disproportionality that is significant. When the state identifies an LEA as having significant disproportionality, the LEA must set aside 15% of funds for coordinated early intervening services. That would be funds for school-age children as well as preschool-age children. The Performance and Data Accountability staff of the Alabama State Department of Education Special Education Services section met with SEAP members for the Special Education Advisory Panel members back in April of 2020 with the sole purpose of reviewing the current significant disproportionality calculations, as well as the identification methodology, and determining if there is a need to make changes to the current standards or thresholds. As a result, the advisory panel members recommended that the ALSDE Special Education Services section use a minimum cell size of 10 and an in size of 30. This represented no change in the minimum cell size, but it did add an in size of 30. In the previous requirements, we did not implement or use an in size, but we did use a cell size. The panel members also recommended that the Department, Special Education Services, reduced the risk ratio from 5.0 to 3.0. The Department, Special Education Services, accepted those recommendations and have applied the new standards for the significant disproportionality analysis. And once we accepted those standards, we were required to submit our definition along with the thresholds to the U.S. Department of Education Office of Special Education Programs as part of our grant award for IDEA in Special Education Services. With that being said, I want to take the time again to say thank you all for providing us and giving us that opportunity to provide training as well as information around disproportionality. And I will say we look forward to future opportunities to conduct similar types of trainings and also engaging with you all as stakeholders with setting targets and looking at other data and information to help us achieve what's necessary and needed to ensure that we are improving results for children.
Okay, thank you, Eric, Mr. Dixon. Now we're going to move forward on the agenda. We have a SES Special Education Sections updates from Ms. Crystal Richardson. She is the program coordinator for our section.
Good morning again, everyone. I just wanted to share a few updates before we go to the slide and the links that are on the slide. We have 6 sections here in Special Education Services. And I wanted to just share a few things that some of our units are working on. We have a fiscal unit, and it's fiscal management. And they've been working on getting all our new contracts ready to go for October 1. As you know, our fiscal year here in Alabama is October 1 through September 30th. With the feds, it's July 1 through June 30th. They have been processing applications for funding requests, approving budgets in EGAP, as well as providing training on EGAP and proportionate share. Our dispute resolution team that has been updating our contracts for our due process hearing officers, our mediators, and our IEP team facilitators. They have been processing any requests for a mediation or an IEP, facilitated IEP meeting, any due process that has come in, as well as any 60-day complaints. That section is also looking at our Alabama Administrative Code changes that we want to do sometime within the next year, as well as streamlining the Mastering the Maze document to be consistent with the federal regulations and not going over and beyond. We also have a data and accountability section that Mr. Eric Dixon, who just reported to you on disproportionality. We're doing a lot of work in the area of disproportionality right now, looking through eligibility reports for LEAs. We also have a data collection period that's starts next week, and that's for our state reporting that we will use to complete our annual performance report. And our compliance monitoring team, our technical assistance team, and our instructional support team have been preparing our monitoring documents. They've started the monitoring process based on the schedule that the department uses with comprehensive monitoring. We're also finalizing reports of LEAs that were reviewed last year that we did not complete, and then those LEAs that were on the list that we never got to last year. So we're looking at, I think, about 43 some LEAs that are being monitored this year. We've been developing resources for teachers, and we'll see some of those in a few minutes when we look at the website. We're working on course of study committees and working on accommodations manual for teachers to use in the classroom, specifically in the general education classroom. We've been providing training for our novice coordinators. We have several new coordinators this year, or those that have 3 years or less experience in the coordinator position. We're also creating a summer academy for those who are interested in working with children with autism and teaching children with autism. And we've been responding to TA requests as needed. Been encouraging the use of high leverage practices and training on the high leverage practices. And we've also been looking at the nuts and bolts of Schoology. And I know some of the comments that were made during the public comment period were about students with significant disabilities. And we have ensured that the alternate achievement standards are in Schoology. And we've got a few little last steps to take, but teachers will have access to those alternate achievement standards in Schoology as well. I do agree with the advocate who submitted the letter, and that IDEA has not changed and it is in full effect. I know in Alabama, we've been very conservative to give a whole lot of guidance because we did not want it to be inconsistent with any guidance that OSEP has been issuing. And we'll show you the guidance that OSEP has issued since March. And then we are anticipating at least one more Q&A document from OSEP. Not sure when that will get to us. But let's look at the links that are outlined here on this page. So anyone who's interested in looking for any guidance that we may have given from the department and specifically Special Education Services, we can show you right now. So the first link goes to our main web page, I believe. And this is the main web page. If you go on the main web page and click COVID-19, you will see all of these items that we have put on our website since March when the schools were asked to close. If you scroll down, there is an area right here where we talk about any of the guidance that we've given in the area of Special Education Services. So anything that we have received from the Office of Special Education Programs will be listed here. Any Q&As that Special Education Services has developed will be here. There's webinars that we have done for class that are listed here. So this would be the site for all resources related to COVID-19. And then on the Special Education Services page, we also have under Policies and Procedures, COVID-19 tab, and some of these documents are the same as on the main web page. But we also have some resources listed as well. So we just wanted to make sure that you were aware of all of the documents that have been put out since March. Okay. And then we also have educational resource list that the TA team put together to support special educators and families during remote learning. And this is also available on our webpage. And then we have the webinars that we did with class. Julie Weatherly and I did 2 webinars with class, and basically they were just a Q&A type webinar. And the questions were actually submitted to us and we answered them during the webinar. And after the first webinar, we took the questions that were submitted to do the second webinar. And they're on the class webpage as well. And we will be interested to hear from the SEAP panel. And I always say panel twice, and I hate that, but the SEAP members regarding the comments made during the public comment. But we will also be working on a Q&A document based on the questions that were sent to us again this morning in the letter from ADAP. And Melissa, that's Dr. Card, that's all I have right now.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Dixon and Ms. Richardson. At this time, we're going to pause for a few minutes. We are waiting on our speaker of the day, Dr. Davis, to arrive. She was in another meeting or several other meetings, and she put us on her agenda. So we're going to pause here, give us a few minutes and see if we can usher her in. Okay, we apologize for the delay. We have not located her just yet. So if you would go ahead and break till the 11:15 time, and we will come back at 11:15.
Just tell them we apologize.
Okay, thank you all for your patience. We appreciate that. Our presenter has arrived and we appreciate her coming today. The presenter today is ALSDE Assistant Superintendent, Dr. Elizabeth Davis. We're going to see just a second, let the interpreter get logged in. 1 second. Okay, thank you so much. Now, Dr. Davis.
Yes. Okay. So, and I have a question before I get started. If I'm going too fast for the interpreter, how will you let me know?
You should be fine. Just do what you normally do, and I'll be able to keep up. You're good.
Okay. Okay.
I'll be
Thank
fine.
you. You can do this if
thank
that.
you.
Yeah. You can do this if. Say slow
Hold on,
down.
I
Okay.
can see you.
Oh, she can't see. So
I couldn't see
you. Welcome.
Because I can't.
Welcome, everyone, and thanks for inviting me. I know it's busy for everyone, and I wish I could say I've gotten used to talking to a screen, but I haven't. I like the interaction with humans and so please, just if I go too fast or if there are questions at the end, I'm happy to answer because you can typically read your audience somewhat to know if they're confused, or maybe it's because I taught 7th grade, but like I've been exposed and done a lot with children all the way up to adults, you know, in audiences. So typically I can see if I'm boring you all to tears, or if I'm talking Chinese because I use education lingo, or even, you know, if I'm on spot. So please just let us know and I can try to clarify.
Please submit your questions in the chat box because we cannot see at this time due to the presentation being up for the presenter. If you would put the questions in the chat box, then we will download those questions and get them to the appropriate people for sufficient answers. Thank you, Dr. Davis.
Yes. So today I was invited to talk just a little bit about the reopening plan. Process started back, we started back in March, and then with the closing, you know, how to close school quickly, get it wrapped up for the year. And I remember saying, I'm so thankful that this is at the end of the year instead of at the beginning of the year, because I guess having 2 kids of my own, I know that school is in April and May is testing, of course, you know, several weeks in April, and then in May while there is a lot of instruction that goes on, there's also those celebratory events like field days and awards. And so we were blessed to be able, you know, to close down in a time where we knew that the impact could be a little less than if this had happened in September. So we also quickly realized that we needed to really plan for, with the other states around us also and across the US, but particularly we were worked with SREBs. They had an education reopening task force, and with 16 other states, and we worked with them hand in hand, also with another national organization, CCSSO, and of course, our SEAL task force. We had them that we continued to work with, and finally, Opportunity Lab was another entity that we brought in to help us. And so what I'll share today are just a few of the elements, and we know that unless something changes by next Tuesday, that all school systems in Alabama will officially open for the school year. Now, what they open what that opening looks like is different, but they will officially reopen. And I remember we really talked about trying, superintendents trying to push back that date. And while as a parent, I was like, oh, my child, she's been out of school since March. I need her to go back. We knew it wasn't the virus that would go away. We knew it was the planning time, and especially the learning that some of our educators would need to be able to implement some statewide things in a time frame that was really unrealistic, but we made it work like we always do in education to try to prevent some of the issues. For example, the paper packets, and those are great for some, but we wanted to make sure that we had a curriculum that was similar across the board as a minimum that folks could add on to that, and then also a statewide learning management system. And the reason I mention that is because that's where some of this funding comes in the first few slides that I'm going to show you. So these three funding, and I also want to say this. So while it's fabulous, we have 2 statewide initiatives that we were able to push out, which was our learning management system, Schoology, and then a digital curriculum for grades pre-K through 12, which was Schools PLP. And just like any other statewide initiative, there are always bumps and struggles when you implement something of this magnitude. So in no way did we think it would be perfect. But we also knew that we needed to provide something at a minimum that we offered across the state. So that was the purpose and where some of this funding comes from that was at the state level. The LEAs, the districts actually got a lot of this money that we did not get. So if you go to the next slide, and I'm going to break down these 3 pots, and the next slide is why I'm going to this one. So you will see here the 5 different, it's 3 pots, but there are 5 different funding, not options really, but options or areas. So ESSER, ESSER, you see at the LEA and at the state, there were 2 different mechanisms. So at the state, you're able to see here what we purchased with our state ESSER money. And it was a focus on, of course, the digital curriculum, and it is it's Schools PLP. And we really have worked to make sure that that where there were gaps, for example, the pacing guides that were provided by Schools PLP, in our opinion, they were not as efficient as they could be for our teachers. So our staff here at the state created what we call crosswalks. So it took all of the Schools PLP lessons and aligned them to our state standards to say, because if you've been in it, there's assess it, there's teach it, there's watch it, there's all of the. So as a teacher, we try to make that easier for them as well to know which one of those align to which standards. So, and then also our learning management system, and then the digital textbook library. And that was to give a single point of access for all of our, so if at my child's school, I'll just use that as an example. If they have 4 different textbooks, then, and they have the digital they can see them digitally at school. This allows my daughter to then, and they don't have this at her school, but I'm just saying, that allows her to then sign in one place and access all 4 of those digital textbooks. So that is what some of the funding that we also spent. And that's all we had at the state level. Then we looked at the LEAs, and the ESSER money for the LEAs was, again, there is an application, because with it being federally funded, there is an application that they had to provide and complete based on what their needs were. There's a lot of flexibility, but we also know that just like at other federal funding pots, that the accountability is still going to be there. So we need to get it aligned on the front end instead of the back end. And so most of those, they've been completed, most of them, and they have been submitted and to be approved and signed off on. And so each LEA is different in what their ESSER funds were used for based on what their needs were due to, COVID-19. So that's one pot of money, but it was at two different pots, one for LEAs and one for us at the state. GEAR is the second funding source from Corona, from COVID-19. And this was some of the governor's funding, one of the funding pots there. And so you will see that was used to put Wi-Fi on all of the school buses across the state. So if your district, though, already had Wi-Fi, then on your school buses, then it allowed them to check that and to show what else was needed to support, digital learning. But this is what it had to be used for first. And if you go beyond, if you're looking for maximizing your funding, some might say, why didn't you put the Wi-Fi, at City Hall or this or that? Well, on buses, and being able to park those buses is one thing, but also as kids go back to school and ride their buses to athletic events, to, back and forth to school. Some of our kids, have up to an hour on the bus in the morning or in the afternoon. It lends itself to allowing children to do their homework on the bus, to athletic events or field trips, so there are all kinds of uses that this can enhance with this Wi-Fi on the school bus. So that was one of the funding things, and that money was pushed out to the districts. And then also academic support and instructional resources. And you'll see the two big areas that this money can support for your districts. And this is my world, those of you that know me in student learning. So it gives those systems money to pay for anything that may be impacted and with an achievement gap. So it could be a vulnerable population. It could be also funding for, it was looking at before and after school tutoring, because it costs to pay a teacher a stipend to stay after and tutor kids, whether it be reading, whether it be math, and so whether it be social studies or science. So that was an option. And it also was looking at really any type of at-home resource that the system wanted to offer. And so this pot was a different amount for each district. It was based on there was a formula that the Fed said that those districts that were impacted more severely by COVID had high numbers of vulnerable populations, which, where there are different, that doesn't just identify one group of kids. There's multiple groups of vulnerable populations. So those systems were awarded more money based on that formula that the Fed said, to get this, you have to do that, which makes sense, because if I had a higher infection rate or impact rate, then I might need more funding. And so that's what those two funding sources were for. And again, that was an assurance sheet that the school systems, every LEA completed, sent in, and then they will get the funds and do that with those funds. And then the last part is the CRF, or coronavirus. There's so many letters, acronyms, I'm sorry. So this is what really the first pot was for devices. And so again, goes to the same thing. If a system was already one-to-one, and there are several out there, they could submit other expenses for digital learning. It could be Wi-Fi hotspots, if that is what works for your district. There could be several different options, but it had to be focused on those digital devices. So some parents are saying right now, well, my child still doesn't have a device. There's money out there. Well, every state got this money. So the impact on Lenovo, Chromebook, Apple, all those device people that make devices, they're all in the same spot right now. So devices are not here in some of our places, but they've been ordered. So know that. And then the other pot of CRF funds, those are for the healthcare support. So the key to both this last pot of money, which is the CRF, is it has to be expended by December 15th. So anything that's not, we have to send back over to the state treasury's office, because then that's a federal rule, not a state rule. So that is why some folks wanted, and I would too, if I were back in the district, I would want to have, be able to, add an addition, a larger nursing, room or add-on to the building. Well, we know that process takes many months, and this money has to be expended. And the rule with this one was it had to be anything that would upgrade a current would be temporary. And so the rules kind of limited some of the options, but it went for supplies, PPE, nursing. You see a lot of plexiglass around. That could be used for this. Contracting, you could contract with agency and have additional parapros or aides come in. It was very flexible, while also knowing it had to be spent by December. So those are the three pots of money. And we don't have any left at the state, because you'll see 4 of these 5 all went to the districts, which they should go. So the next 2 slides. Okay, so the next few slides will really kind of just provide you a deeper dive into what, as a state, we focused on and with these funds. One is improving remote learning. So the digital curriculum, which is schools PLP. Some people hate it right now, because with any other statewide implementation, and this is, I've tried to say, it's like a digital textbook is what you're getting. I've not seen it. I've never found a textbook or even a program, and I've been in education 22 years, that meets every single standard to the depth and rigor it needs to. So continuing to supplement and add things to this curriculum is part of it. Where the stress and frustration has come in is the short amount of time, and because your teachers want to do the very best they can. Most of them feel like it's a lot to learn, and it is, and they want to be prepared for their students. And so be patient with them, and because we're all in this together. Devices for students, and we knew that was an issue, as in with every other state. So, asking and working with the governor to provide that funding. Professional development for teachers. So part of our purchase with both the learning management system, Schoology, and with the curriculum, which was schools PLP, we also purchased statewide PD, and we still are offering that to teachers. And we're also offering it in-house too, some different teaching options, different PD options, because I'm gonna be fabulous with teaching digitally, remotely, but I still may need professional development on how to engage my students. And so it's not perfect right now. They're still working through learning how to make sure all the kids are logged in, or so you may be thinking, well, my friend said that so-and-so only taught for 10 minutes or only taught for, or taught all day digitally. Well, neither one of those is ideal, and if it's happening in 2 or 3 months, for those that choose to stay virtual, then we probably need to address that. But just know that we're all trying to work through this together, but the goal is to improve the opportunity for remote learning. I hear parents say on the radio, or there'll be no more snow days, because the truth is we should be able, as we get used to this, to not have, when the weather's bad and we have to stay home for roads, or we then can use those devices and use those, use that Wi-Fi, those hotspots, whatever it may be, to hopefully not have to make up those days, but not waste them. So the statewide learning management system, or some folks will call it an LMS, and that's really the hub of where all the instruction is loaded, videos, assessments, teacher calendars, all of that is in there. It's a fabulous tool as we get used to it. You may have heard of other ones used at different college levels: Canvas, Blackboard, Moodle. So Schoology is the one that we have, and there's a purpose for that, because when we roll over to PowerSchool next year, which is iNow Chalkable right now, everything that goes on in Schoology. So when my daughter's assignment is uploaded in Schoology and that grade is there, that grade will then be in what we call right now iNow Chalkable. So it will be beautiful in another year. And then last but not least is that connectivity issue, which is one of the hardest, I think, because, and it's that way across the country, because there are areas right now that just, they need the bandwidth, or they need the different, the infrastructure, and it's not there yet. But hopefully with the work that's going on with ADECA, and also the focus, that's one of the positive things that has come from this, is I really feel like as a country, we are headed towards the right direction to provide that. And also the system's finding very unique ways, partnering with different groups, agencies, and also putting it on buses, putting Wi-Fi on buses, those kinds of things. And I know nobody wants to have to drive their child or have their child walk to where a school bus is parked. We totally get that. But understand we are trying to do short-term and long-term so that we are able to get there. And if you keep doing nothing, you're going to get nothing. And so that's a big push for me, has been, but also across the US with this now, is start somewhere and let's keep moving and keep that going. So and then the next slide, it breaks it down for you. And I've talked about a lot of this, but it really shows you these tools that are now statewide from part of the funding request. And so I will not go through all of this, with you, but you see how and what, and that's important. We're really committed here to trying to really show it. It's very complicated in the fact that there are so many funding options, but there were so many different needs also, and then also so many limitations on how and what the funding could be spent on. And so some of you say, well, I may have said, I'm not seeing that right now. Well, they may still be in the process of figuring out, depending on what funding source has to be spent first, what to do. So again, this is a very quick turnaround, but we're very thankful that we have this opportunity. So this is a very good slide for you to have so that you can see as a state what we're all trying to do, not just the State Department. We're working with the governor's office. We're working with ADECA. We're working with different groups to try to make this happen. So the next slide, and this is something that was also purchased with some of the original, when we had COVID-19, when it first hit, and the first pot, they wanted to make sure that we had funding to be able to provide things across the state. So these masks and these, the reusable masks have been and are in process of still being delivered to all schools. They were ordered and all shipped here. And so we're sending enough for 3 for each student and staff member. So they leave here in big state vans, daily. And there's really it's not like we've hired a company to deliver them. One of our assistant state superintendents delivered some Friday and yesterday. Our state nurse is delivering them. because our goal is to get them to our schools as quick as possible. So know that that if, is an option. And I know that cities and counties have really done some dynamic things to put those in the hands, of parents and students and community before we got these out. I will say if your children or anything like mine they've gone through several, because just like their tennis shoes and notebooks, they've lost a few, torn a few. Of course, if you're my 10-year-old son, his stinks, so I have to wash it, so this is a good thing to have, even if you've already got one. We keep a drawer of them at home with our pencils now. So that's our school supply drawer. The next slide just shows you the hand sanitizer that we were able to work with and get. And you'll see this 600 gallons. We have it all across our office, but the schools, they were delivered to the schools. Again, with the mask, they're being delivered by whomever, is here that can take them. And there's also, we've had several districts, they've called and with their money, they're like, can we order from that same company or that? And so we've been able to provide, they can order from whomever, as long as they meet the requirements, but we've been able to provide this too from funding, from federal funding. Should I keep going?
Yes.
Okay. So the other slides that we come into now gives you more of an overview of the roadmap development. And so the first slide the next slide you will see, these are all of the different states that we as a state department looked through, discussed, shared with our SEAL task force, which was the superintendent's education access. More of those letters that I can't remember. I'm getting them all jumbled, but the original SEAL task force, we added some subcommittee members, but it's important to know that we looked at many different state reopening plans to see what they did well. You work smarter, not harder, but also where we saw gaps maybe that we needed to fill. So this was just an example or a listing of all the states that we looked. We used some of their stuff, they used some of our stuff. So it's a good overview for you to know that, and everybody to know that we didn't just create something out of the wild blue sky. And a lot of these states have the same type of setup, same type of local control to, and that is a term that confuses folks sometimes, but so we were trying to look at many different similarities, not just one particular state, but all of these states had something specific that looked similar to something in our state to look at. So the next slide shows you, that was the color code, because we then worked with, of course, we worked with ADPH and still work with them daily, but this is what folks needed and wanted, because it kind of helped give them an idea of where and how we might want to look at different options for reopening. When systems reopened, and you go back to June 30th, and you also go back and you can look at it daily, and there was a lot of red a month ago. Now there's not as much. And so that's why you will see schools starting to do hybrid, where they have some kids on some days, which is, by the way, it's a very, I don't want to say challenging, but it is. I mean, this is uncharted territory as far as the way school is done. And so the patience is needed for everyone, because it's phenomenal what they're doing. I'm thrilled about it. But we know that as long as you can provide options, that you should be able to meet the needs of kids. My child's short example, her system started back where they could go full virtual, they could go hybrid, or they could go, traditional. And so as a parent, I got to choose traditional. So we're very fortunate that school systems worked to do this because a lot of this has not happened before. It's been either the traditional or the all virtual. So know that this is what kind of guided there. We were looking at first to see if there should be numbers, or if it's a community spread, or if it is just a school spread like the flu. I used to close my schools when we had a high flu rate of over 10%. So we'd close that school. So this, again, was not as simple as that because of the newness and the unknowns of, the virus. So know that this is what is kind of driving those decisions by districts. It's not we just think we want to stay home for 9 more weeks. So there is some rhyme to our trying to kind of work through some things to reopen and to close. I foresee closing happening again by district or even by school in a district. I may be wrong. It's called the scientific notion or hypothesis. And I feel like that's what's happening in the US right now or across the world. So that is there for you at any time with ADPH on their website. The next slide, and this is what we were very clear about. And I know it's almost like when I taught, we blamed the elementary school blamed the parents, the high school blamed us at the middle school, and the post-secondary blamed the high school for not having the students ready. So we wanted to make sure that folks knew what the roadmap was, which was a guidance document. There are a few things in there that we call, quote, essential with our legend, because we know that those are things that have to happen because it's a state code, state statute, law, could even be a federal. So besides that, these are suggestions. And we tried to even have it into 2 different categories where there was consideration and guidance, which I think is the next slide. But this slide this is in our roadmap, which is still posted, but it is a guidance document, but it's based on a lot of evidence and expertise. You saw the states that we had many conversations from their state curriculum directors to their state superintendents. A lot went into this to be able to support the school, but know that the school needed the flexibility to do what was best for their district. And that was so important in this, because a one-size-fits-all is not what we need moving forward. It may come to that again, but this document was created to help navigate through that based on based on letting the districts design their schools to meet the needs of their community. So next slide. Again, shows you the different entities. Oh. Okay. The next slide just shows you the 3 different entities that I've talked about, the Department of Public Health, and really what their role was. Systems role is, and just a quick tracing. We learned we don't do contact tracing. Schools don't, school systems don't. That is the role of Department of Public Health. And so this slide, again, just gives you that information because it all gets confusing because there's so much of it. So this is a helpful slide for everyone. Next slide. These are when I talked about the legend, these are the 3 slides, the 3 areas in the roadmap that they could, when we had it in the guidance for the roadmap, if it was essential, then they needed to provide in their roadmap, some general information about how it would be implemented, or stating and assuring that it would be, and also knowing that some of these are not clear, but they're not a clear cut, here's what we are going to do, because we know with the CDC guidance, and that is something we're going to follow between that and Department of Public Health, it's going to change. It's already changed 2 times in the last week, I think, week or two. So that is where, although it's essential, you can't lock in on one specific way to do a lot of that because it is continually changing. Guidance, the last 2, we provide them with guidance and consideration things to think about and to possibly include based on either a best practice, something that's worked in another state. And we spent a lot of time in our national organizations with folks that had already lived through and brought school back through other natural disasters like Hurricane Katrina. And so I spent a lot of time with those folks because curriculum is, and it's the most important thing for me, selfishly. Need them to be safe, of course, but so knowing that was a lot, those were a lot of the things that we put in as guidance because it worked for that situation with a hurricane, but it may not work but we put it in there as something to look at. So those areas, when you see their roadmap and you say, well, they don't have anything that addresses this under guidance, they didn't have to. Okay, so that is why. Next slide just shows what they were doing now, and that meant go back and do now. And these are the things, if they're in blue in that area, that they should do right now. And also, if the school closes again, say that the whole school we're forced to, or then they need to go back and do now those things, and then returning to campus as they return to campus, and getting the campus ready and working the campus while the kids and staff are on there is returning to campus. And so we tried to break it down. That's also what a lot of states did. We tried not to get too far in the weeds, but to break it down into some categories. The instructional scenarios, by now you've been able to see these in roadmaps. You also have, with the traditional.
Dr. Davis, can you pause for a second while we switch interpreters? The screen froze on the other interpreter.
Yes.
Just pause 1 second. Thank you.
Sure.
Something was up in SES.
Window on that.
Okay,
Sorry.
okay.
And hang in there, I'm almost done. I'm sorry, y'all. Instructional scenarios, these are the 3 areas that we ask schools to consider and look at, as we knew that the goal is to have traditional all the time, but not knowing what is coming, what could come still. We had to be prepared, and they had to be prepared for blended and remote. And you will see, you'll see some other options out there that are a component of these 3 larger ones. You'll see hybrid. A hybrid is really where they are, they're taking blended to a deeper level. So just know that these are the 3 overarching, and your system, or systems out there may have even, they may go deeper, even one, a la carte, where my blended is not a full blended. I only have 1 course that is virtual. So, and it could be for lots of reasons. So the next slide gives you the pediatrics, the American Academy of Pediatrics guidance, which you've probably heard. Now, it seems like every week a different group would give us different information. And when I say us, I mean the whole country. We would hear everybody, kids need to be back in school. No, kids don't need to be back in school. So back and forth. But that we wanted to be able to provide links also, so that if something changed, they knew where to go. Next slide is kind of like a if then, but if they open, if for in person, and our expectation, was and still is that they all reopen in the fall, which we already have seen some, most, and we want that option to reopen with a remote learning option, and then knowing that the local boards are the ones, based on what the superintendent recommends, in consultation with the Department of Public Health, and that's their decision. And that may not be, we found some folks want us to tell them what to do, but then other times they don't want us to tell them what to do. It's kind of like my parents. Sometimes I wanted them to, sometimes I didn't. But there was a lot of question about that. And so this was just here are the expectations. And then the next two slides, the last two slides, this is really a timeline that we provided because we know that schools were bombarded, but we wanted everybody to see what all was done to help the whole child and our systems. And another way to look at this is our systems were hit with just this from us. So imagine getting this from us at the State Department, parents, teachers, who knows, lawyers, we know. And it's not an excuse. It's also a way to go back and look, because this is still on our State Department website. And it is, what it is it's charted, not by date, not by month, but like all of the memos, when you go through each of these months and see where we sent a memo, well, they're all together on the COVID-19, the coronavirus website, the link on our website. So this just gives you another visual to see what was happening in different months. But you are welcome to go and look at all of that, because we really wanted to be transparent in what was being provided, but also to help realize what all was coming at them, systems, parents, whomever, to try to A, support, but B, just stay updated. And so that's there for you. And there's even more now on the website. We love to put things on the website. So that is it as far as the general reopening and the funding. And I know that last month would have helped to have known this last month, but I know that we've posted these things too. I used a lot of this in one of my PD sessions for somebody, professional development, and we try to post all of that. So hopefully it has been helpful, and when they gather the questions, I'll do my best to either answer or find you an answer, because I don't know many of the answers. So thank y'all for inviting me and for listening to me while some of you may be asleep by now. I understand that, but I appreciate it.
Dr. Davis, we want to thank you for being with us today and going through the roadmap. We showed them before you came in the links on our webpage under COVID-19, so they know at least where to access all of those resources that you mentioned. So we, again, appreciate you being here.
Thank you again, Dr. Davis. We're going to have Gina come back and give us the final comments and wrap up for this SEAP meeting.
Thank you all to the State Department personnel, including Crystal and Dr. Davis and Eric and Melissa, for all your work to help us to pull all this together, to give us some insight and some reiteration of some information that was out there, and helping families and all stakeholders to better understand how all of this came to be where we are now. As we work through this and reflecting back on the many comments that I will share with the panel members later, I think we've been through a lot since March. I think stakeholders, including students and families and the educators in the classroom, the special education teachers, professionals, the administrators, the State Department personnel, all the way up to the federal level. I think we are grappling with issues of the likes we've never seen. We really are flying this plane as we put wings on it. And the questions that were most relevant to us originally in March, now we're trying to find our way through it. How do we, as panel members, fulfill our responsibility to help to give input and to guide the work going forward? Because now it's a question of how do we, as not only within our state, but across the nation. I mean, these are issues that are happening for everyone. But our specific concern is to help to address, identify, and make recommendation to those unmet needs of students with disabilities. And so our work really begins to address the needs of the 90,000 plus students in Alabama that are receiving special education services. So as we move forward as a panel, as we begin our work in this and understanding the data and make recommendation to and fulfill our responsibilities as a panel, this is going to be a lot of work for us. To be informed in this and to make recommendations that are going to help to meet those unmet needs. This panel's got some work to do. So with all of that said, it's a question of not now what services are students getting, but moving forward about where are students and what are we going to do to identify those needs, and what are we going to do to come up with plans and supports that will help to address those learning gaps that have potentially gotten there for students. How do we get out of this hole, and what are we going to do to make individualized supports available for all students to address each individual need that students have that are receiving special ed services? So with all of that in mind, I would like to again thank the panel, thank all the State Department members and staff and stakeholders and the public viewing today. Our work is large, and I will be working with the panel so that we can begin to look at the questions, look at the data, and work cooperatively with the State Department to help make informed recommendations about moving forward. So thank you all so much. We will be having another meeting. Our next publicly scheduled meeting will be, and Melissa, help me out. It's October the 14th. Is that correct?
That is correct.
Okay. So the panel members could please put that date on their calendar for October the 14th. And we will be scheduling working sessions in between with the panel members to begin to look at these issues, the many comments we received, the data that we have access to, and looking to begin our work. But thank you all so much for your time. Thank you all for your efforts and your work and the time that we'll be asking you to put forth to be informed recommenders in this. And thank you to our interpreters also.
Thank you. Gina, is the meeting adjourned?
Yes, ma'am. If anyone has anything else at this time, if not.
All right. Thank you all. Have a great.
Thank you.
You can't.